Okay, I'm wondering if we should get going in the meantime anyway, because I do know of some of the questions that were raised ahead of time by some of you. So maybe we can talk about homeschooling for neurodiverse interests. I think let's get started because I'm conscious of time and I don't want to run out of time because this is still scheduled to end at 8. Huh? So it's now 7 minutes past the hour, so we've got just under 53 minutes to go. Of course, we can go slightly over time if there's need, but I don't want to take too much of your time tonight. So let's begin by just talking about neurodiversity and homeschooling. I think the first thing I want to get out of the way is what is homeschooling. So if you're in South Africa, there's a very clear definition within law. As things stand, of course, the basic education law is under revision right now as we speak. The Bella Bill is in discussions and might be promulgated sometime soon, but then it might be appealed, so it might be under a legal protracted process before it actually gets implemented. But so let's talk about how it currently stands. The status quo in homeschooling at the moment is that homeschooling means schooling under the parents' roof of their own children. But we all know that the reality is that homeschooling is now a term that's embracing all kinds of schooling. So just let me know if you have feelings about what homeschooling should be, because some people feel it's the pure way, only at home by the parents, but there are many people going to alternative sites. So they're not doing it at home, or they are employing a mix of facilities and home. So they're doing it in a blended way. They're not exclusively schooling their own children. They're also creating opportunities for their kids to socialize outside of home and to be schooled by others. Sometimes it's out of necessity because the parents are working, and sometimes it's because they choose to have their kids out of home and learning in other environments. Sometimes it's for the extracurricular activities that these facilities are able to provide, and sometimes it's also for the ability to, have an environment that you can learn socially. And there's pros and cons to that, I know. So some people want to de-school and they don't want to have any kind of structured learning that's externally applied. They want to do pure self-directed learning where it's individually based and self-paced, and that's possible. And then you have those who want to do it in a more structured, externalized way where there's adults providing the guidance. Okay, so that's what is sometimes referred to as cottage schools, although that term is fallen out of disfavor because schooling is presumed to be by registered educational institutions. And that's certainly what the law says, that you can only call yourself a school if you're registered as such with the Department of Education in your province. So these alternative sites that are helping to school children using sometimes just books, sometimes online providers, of which CambriLearn is one of them, but there's many online schooling platforms, then those are not technically homeschooling by the law's definition, but certainly are a growing trend in this movement of alternative education, for want of a better word. Okay, so many parents, out of necessity, out of choice, are sending their kids either full-time or part-time to these centers, and CambriLearn is one of those that endorses this kind of schooling choice. You can do it at home if you like, one-on-one, but you can also take your kids to other venues and have them socialize and learn with the help of other adults guiding their learning, and still get accredited with your learning, still come out with some kind of evidence of learning that both satisfies the South African rules in terms of assessment standards, but also gives you that transferability should you ever want to go back into what we call mainstream schooling or the more traditional realm, bricks and mortar that's registered with the government as a government or private school. If you want to ever go back to those, it is helpful to have a record of learning that's recognized. So some kind of report card or academic transcript. So yeah, that's how it works. I'm just being asked by Angela if there are people waiting. wonder where she is. I'm sure she should be joining us now. We've started, so I hope she's on the right link, but I'm sure she'll be joining us shortly. Okay, so that's the homeschooling landscape as it stands. And then neurodiversity, where does it fit into that? Because there are some people that have asked, what if my child is on the autism spectrum? Or what if my child is ADHD diagnosed, right? There's a suspicion or a diagnosis of attention deficit or hyperactivity, or there's a diagnosis of being on the spectrum, whether high functioning or not. Then how does homeschooling, how does this concept of alternative schooling fit in? And that is really about what kind of school environment you want to provide for your child. So what we believe at CambriLearn is that you have to fit the curriculum to the child and make it adaptable to the child, and not vice versa. So there is no single answer to that question. It's very personal. It's a decision that needs to be made on the advice of suitably qualified professionals, but also on your instinct, parents. Never second guess a mom's instinct, I would say. That's certainly my attitude is you need to trust your gut and go with what you think will work best for your child. Your child, your choice. I want to stress that is what should really be respected in education. That's what home education is about. Okay, so what we suggest then is you actually profile your child somehow. So you seek counsel. It doesn't have to be a formal psychoeducational assessment. Those are quite expensive. There are many other educational therapists or teachers or caregivers that can advise you, but certainly seek counsel of someone who can perform some kind of test or assessment or profile to decide which is the best curriculum, which is the best form of schooling. Is it on-screen? Is it a blend of on-screen and paper-based, or should it be entirely book-based and off-screen? And also, who should be involved in educating that child? Obviously, you're ultimately responsible as a parent. Okay, we must emphasize this. All parents in homeschooling are effectively the principals of their homeschool, is how I like to put it. The buck stops with you, in other words, moms, dads. The educational caregivers are of primary responsibility in this. You can employ other providers, online schools, but you cannot expect that they be the ultimate accountability for your child's education. That's the very nature of homeschooling, is you've taken it upon yourself, even in law, to be the provider of that service. So when it comes to the neurodiverse, to those learners, to those children of ours that have differences in learning, what we recommend is that you get help, you find the optimal schooling venue or method, and that you then try and implement it to the best of your ability. Don't worry about judgment. Don't worry about what others say worked for their children, because every child is unique. But do stick with it and then seek support where you can. So the other benefit of joining sometimes online communities or people like Angela's support groups is that you have a network of parents who are in this journey with you. So your children can be supported if they are in a pure socialized environment, so in something like a tutor center. But you as a parent, you also need support. You also need to have some network that you can rely on for advice and counsel. And that's what Angela Collins provides, right? And that's why we partner with people like her, because we feel that you need a family outside of your immediate family to help you with this journey. So we do encourage that. We suggest that parents join up in groups or join communities, often on Facebook, WhatsApp. They communicate many ways. Email and webinars are one way of them allowing the group to interact. Okay, so this is how you can overcome the isolation that does sometimes come with this form of schooling, because this, of course, is the exception to the rule, right? It's not mainstream. It's not what the majority do. So it's very easy to fall into the trap of feeling that you're making a mistake or doubting yourself or wondering if there's a better way. And so it's good to join others who have encountered the same difficulties, who have the same questions as you. Okay. I do want to emphasize, though, that schooling and learning are not identical. In other words, it is possible to be learning without attending any kind of formal school. But something to consider, and I always say this to parents, if your child is homeschooling and you need to ultimately prove their learning, it does help to go through an accredited institution that can provide you that credibility. In other words, that verified, accredited qualification. Now, it's a choice that you make if you choose not to pursue that qualification. You feel that your child doesn't have to come out with certified learning qualifications. But it does have implications sometimes for the tertiary sector if your child wishes to go to university. And it does also sometimes create a problem with changing institutions or moving countries, because other territories, other authorities may well require assessment or proof of level of attainment. So one of the roles that online schools or online curriculum providers, homeschooling platforms like CambriLearn provide, is that assurance that you have some kind of benchmarked levels that are independently assessed and they can be therefore accredited. And that is a pro of joining an online school. But it doesn't mean, however, that you have to then school in a traditional way. So in my experience, there are many people who move from conventional schooling, let's call it, from the mainstream schooling, and come into homeschooling with the same expectations. They still expect to have rigid calendars and to have academic years imposed and to have prescribed minimum subjects. And the truth is, with homeschooling, it's possible to be very creative. In fact, it should be encouraged. So that's something that CambriLearn strives to advocate for. We don't prescribe subjects. We don't prescribe minimum numbers of subjects. Up to grade 9, you are free to school as you like. And compulsory schooling is only up to year 9 in South Africa. So that's something we do encourage, is that you not be bound by this traditionalist thinking of you have to take all the subjects that you would have at a mainstream school. You don't. Now, the fear about that is if you do eclectic, for example, homeschooling, where you mix traditional schooling and homeschooling, or you mix curricula, or you mix modalities of learning. In other words, you basically create your own personal curriculum that aligns with your values or with your child's interests. There's a big fear that you then can never return back to a conventional form of schooling. Well, you can, because there's no way that a public school in South Africa can decline you for any reason. Okay, they can't. If you fall into their catchment area, you are entitled to attend, no questions asked. So there's never a reason why they could decline you. Okay, it doesn't have to be certified. There's no requirement in law that there be a report card. There's no requirements that you prove that your child's been registered with the Department for Homeschooling. There's no such requirements that can be placed on you, that can be placed as barriers to entry. If, however, you have records of learning, obviously it's easier to know what levels to place your child in. And obviously, if you've been following the traditional subjects that are offered by bricks and mortar schools, it's easier to make the transition. But is it a requirement? No. Okay, so one of the benefits of using a platform that's highly flexible, for example, like CambriLearn, but there are others, look out for them, seek them, is that you can then hand pick what subjects you want to do, and you can mix curricula, and you can literally just take one subject from that provider, for instance, and then do the others yourselves or seek other providers, so mix providers. That is also what allows you to cater for neurodiverse learners, of course, because those kids who need a multiplicity of approaches or who have different strengths in different areas, so do curriculum providers, right? They all have their own strengths and their own weaknesses. So the beauty of homeschooling is you can cherry pick what's best from each provider and mix them. So you see how you can optimize your schooling if you're given the freedom to mix and to match according to need. I'll give you another example of how this form of schooling, when it's this flexible, is tailored to neurodiverse learning. So children with learning barriers or with learning differences will have exceptional skills in some areas, they'll have strengths, and they'll have weaknesses like any neurotypical kid as well. We all have an imperfect profile, right? No one has the same strengths across all skills and all areas of learning, but they will have sometimes even bigger peaks and troughs, so even, more disparate profiles. And yet you can tailor their learning so that in the areas of strength, they can be at a higher grade level for some of the subjects where they excel at, or some of the areas of learning, and be at a lower grade level for others. So you see how if you flex in education, you can then tailor a program of learning unique to each child, whereby they're not held back. They don't have this fear of failure. They're not held ransom by their weakest subject by having to keep pace with their lowest level of function. If they excel at certain subject areas, they can progress faster in those subject areas. So what that leads to then is the same child having different subjects at different grade levels simultaneously. Now, that's how it should be for any child, neurotypical or not, because, of course, we know neurodevelopmentally that no child grows in the same areas at the same time, right? It's erratic, this growth path, and it's very individualistic. So there's no way that you can count on every child developing at the same pace in every subject area. And that's therefore natural that in homeschooling, you tailor it to your individual child's profile and growth, so that the milestones will vary by different subject matters, and you will therefore progress at different paces, at different rates in the different subjects. Now, again, you need a platform that permits you to do that. So CambriLearn does. It allows you to mix grade levels across subjects, not just mix curricula. It allows you to go at different paces in different subjects. So I think that's very important for what we are talking about tonight, is having that ability to free up your child to learn at their own comfort, to be self-paced in a way that allows them to progress where they're strong so that they can taste success. You see, that's also very important. They get that positive reinforcement. They are studying and progressing in a way that reinforces what are the possible joys of learning. You are tasting success and self-sufficiency and excellence. You want to have that. It cannot be experienced across all subjects. Of course, that's not possible. We can't all be multi-talented. Well, in the areas where you need to spend more time, where it's going to be harder for you, where you're going to probably avoid the work more because it's less pleasurable, that's just naturally going to take you longer, or going to be an area of less enjoyment. So you have more preferred and less preferred subjects. In the less preferred subjects, you can also just take longer to complete those. But why should those subjects hold you back? So the traditional school system has that weakness built into it, is that you can't generally progress unless all subjects are at the same grade level. You know, imagine traditional schools allowing a child, like at university, to be on, grade 10 maths, but grade 11 science, but grade 12 Afrikaans level, for example, all at the same time. It's not possible, right? Practically, the system is not designed to be individualized, to be tailored for every individual child's learning pathway. That's what homeschooling is for, you see. That's what online liberates you. It allows you the freedom to school at your own child's pace, in your own way, to tailor to their strengths and weaknesses. And that is what can free them up to enjoy learning. And of course, that's one of the ultimate aims of any schooling, right? It should be to create lifelong learners, right? To imbue a love of learning of whatever kind it may be. It's not about the piece of paper that you get at the end that accredits your learning. We're not trying to get to the piece of paper. The journey is more important, the enjoyment thereof, and getting pleasure. Okay, so on that note, I'm now going to talk less, and I'm going to leave Angela to join us. Hello, Angela. So good to have you. Are you still connecting? I see Angela's still joining us with audio. Angela. Okay, I think she may have some connectivity issues. I see it still says connecting to audio, so let's just give her a chance. Yeah, but I mean, I was pretty finished that thought.